Hey guys, welcome back to A Dram of Diving. We are blessed with the presence of Tec Clark. We'll bring him in a minute. I just want to say hello to everybody and let you guys know that the comments are functioning on YouTube and Facebook Live. Both are going. I posted links to the scubaguru.com, the podcast, both the podcasts we're going to talk about soon. They're up in the comments already, so they're up and in there. Again, thank you very much for the glass purchase orders. We sold out of another case. So I think we might actually have one left, maybe, but I'm going to place another order. Pre-order pricing is going to go until June 1st. So just to give you guys a heads up that that's going to change June 1st. So if you're pondering, if you haven't thought about it, then you want to get one of your Glencairn glasses. I know it's a little bit hard to see with that, but if you want to get one of your Glencairn glasses, I would order them before June 1st, before the pricing goes up. And we really appreciate all the support as well as anybody that's joined in on Patreon. Thank you very much. So we are going to jump in with Tec Clark and say hello. And next week, we're actually going to be doing some public safety stuff based on some requests that people have gotten. So without any more delays, let's bring in Tec and say hello. Hey, Tec Clark, how we doing, bud?
Good, Jason. How's it going?
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us on A Dram of Diving.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's great to be here.
Good. You actually just dropped a podcast today, right?
I did. Yeah.
Yeah.
Today, every Wednesday.
Every Wednesday. So it came out a couple hours ago. I put the links up to all the podcasts, but it's going to be the top one up there. So tell us what the one this week was about, and then we'll go into some background history and all that fun stuff. But let's get that out of the way real quick.
Well, the podcast that came out today is the Dive Locker. It's a weekly podcast, but Dive Locker is the only podcast for dive professionals. It's just specific content to dive pros, and it's all meant to increase their areas of leadership, of teaching techniques, risk management, dive business, and that's what it's about. And so, as you all know, everything has been so much about COVID-19, and it just on and on and on, and we're just hearing that. And I think it's a brilliant thing that the agencies are pouring out stuff for us for standards and how do we come back to the quote unquote new normal and on and on. And it's been going on for such a long time. And this past weekend, I'm here in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and Memorial Day weekend. So we're dealing with a holiday that's on basic lockdown, which is odd. Yep. And then the holiday itself is a very sentimental holiday, and one that, requires a lot of reflection and your blessings and those that have gone before you and those that have served and sacrificed. And you combine that with a weekend full of absolute torrential downpour rain and no diving. I was going to go diving Friday, no diving. And, it was just one of these things, like I actually, for the first time in all of this coronavirus stuff, I actually felt it. I felt down and just in a funk. And I realized one of the things that, we need to focus on is how do we get out of this kind of funk? And for me, it was just taking a quick look at an ITC, an old NAUI instructor training course from the early 90s that we shot, just hand movies. It's on VHS. I had to dust off the VHS player.
Nice.
I know some people don't even know what that is.
Yeah, so there's a big cassette tape. You might want to clarify that. Yeah.
Exactly. A huge cassette tape like this big. It goes in. It takes forever to rewind or forward or anything like that. And so I put that in, and it was just all my buddies and my mentors. And so then to look at your mentors and then to look at your students and to reflect back to the early 90s, that was a massive inspiration that kind of took me back. And so that was unique. Watching The Big Blue, one of my favorite movies. And then I'm just sitting here going, wait a minute. What is inspirational? What is it that we can tap into? And so for me, this episode's podcast was about no guests, no interviews, no sponsorships, no coronavirus resources. Just let's talk about what made you passionate about being a dive pro? What makes you passionate about being a dive pro? Why'd you get into it? What are the things that ground us in that? And so that was what the podcast was today, the episode all about today. And so we'll see. You know, I'm
Nice.
inviting everybody that listens to it to join in the conversation. So we can either go to the website and click the microphone and leave a recorded message, or email me, or put it on Facebook under my personal or the Scuba Guru Facebook. Doesn't matter, but I'd love to hear from other dive pros to see what it is that they're doing that's keeping them inspired right now in a time that's kind of weird for all of us.
Yeah.
And that's what the call to action is for this week.
Beautiful. I mean, and that's an excellent transition. That's why I started with it. Is normally we start with like, hey, how you doing? What you've been going on with it? And you kind of hit the nail on the head with, you know, hey, what's your inspiration? What's going on? How are you doing things? So, I mean, that leads to how are you doing? How are you hanging in there? How are those things going? And leads to the fact that I need to grab some whiskey, the fact that you've got a drink right there. So I'm going to grab my whiskey. Will you tell us how you're doing?
Yeah. Yeah. And we'll cheers proper once you get that open.
That works.
I would say things are going very well. You know, I am blessed to have a wonderful family that is now home at this time. So 2 teenage kids and a wife who is a clinical psychologist, and my teenage kids are into sports and everything else going on. Before all of this happened, you know, we were just a scattered family all over the place, running errands, running, you know, here and there, and just being crazy, living, you know, quote unquote life and doing all the things. And then this happened, and you all of a sudden realize, oh my gosh, there's just more to what we were doing, and we need to say no to more things, because the amount of connection we've had as a family has been off the charts incredible. I taught my kids, and my wife for that matter, how to play Texas Hold'em. Nice. And it became like the cool game in our family, you know. So I'm going to send off my daughter to college, and hopefully she can, you know, run the board on some college guys up there, and you know, sweep them up. You know, it's just like
I love it.
So it was a really funny thing to do that. And then I'm also blessed to have a university job at Nova Southeastern University, where I run the academic diving program. And our university is so incredibly supportive, letting people work at home. Even when we don't have scuba operations going on, we're still paid, we're still hired, we're still valued by the university. And that is an amazing blessing. And then a couple podcasts and other things that I've got going on. And it's just really funny to see, like, all of a sudden now podcasts are in and webinars are in. And it's like, oh, okay, this is cool. Yeah. You know, other people are joining in. It's awesome.
Yep.
So
it's changing things
really well.
Good. Well, cheers to that.
Yeah. Cheers. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, absolutely. My pleasure. So, lots of different things are happening. And one of the things you talked about in the podcast today was getting back to and realizing that you haven't really done as much of your own diving as you kind of had hoped. And completely, I understand. I'm the dive safety officer at SUNY ESF. I own a dive shop. I do training. I was working as a sales rep, and I'll probably go back into that. So many different things, and trying to grasp that coming back. And I've always made a standpoint of, okay, preseason or like one dive on a dive trip or whatever, I need a couple of dives for myself to keep at least, if not more. I always try to sneak away whenever I can, but I'm assuming you didn't get to do that because Memorial Day got you rained out.
Right.
So what's the next dive that you're planning that you're going to get back into it? Where are you going? What are you up to?
It's next Friday.
Next Friday? Good.
We just moved it to next Friday. And, you know, basically we're looking at it. There's a couple ways, actually. I mean, number one, we're actually going to do some university work. We're going to be getting into some citizen science work with Project Baseline. And with that, we are looking to host the dive sites that have then dive stations, and the stations at each dive site are the ones that we would be monitoring. And we're going to do that in the dive sites that we frequent here with our dive program, but not for our scuba classes, but for our club. So it gives our club members, especially our marine biology majors, the opportunity to actually engage in some good citizen science work while they're still undergraduates before they become scientific divers. And so what we're doing is we're going to go out, and over a series of weeks, this is the perfect time to just go field assess and find sites that we want to measure and record over time with Project Baseline. So that's the fun side of it. Excuse me, that's the work side of it. The fun side of it is that one of our staff members at our dive program, Kimmy Schmaltz, she worked and I'm just forgetting the name of the company. Oh, it's on the tip of my tongue. Broadreach. Is it Broadreach? Oh, I don't know. I forget. Oh my gosh, I forget. But anyhow, she was, on these liveaboard, like, sailing vessels that would take all these teenagers out, and they would go all through the Caribbean and different sites. And she would be one of the dive leaders, training them in scuba and then taking them on the trips and everything. And she said what they had on their staff there was they had emotional oh gosh, what was the name of that? I'm forgetting the name of that now. It was basically an emotional rescue dive that was all about just like, we need this. And it was not with the students, it wasn't with any of the kids, it was just the staff that would go get their emotional dive on. And I thought that was a really cool thing, and we want to employ that too. So we're looking at inviting our staff out so that they can get some diving under their belt. But what I was saying in the podcast is absolutely true, is that I hate to say it, but after 30 years of being a dive pro, I can't walk onto a dive boat without just doing a complete risk management assessment. And it's the boat, it's the crew, it's the other divers on the boat, it's myself, it's our equipment, it's everything. And the checklists are just, they're constantly going. And then if you add your own students to that, and you add all these other factors and variables, and maybe it's rough seas, and it just goes on and on and on. It's really hard for some dive professionals, myself included, to sit back and have a really good pleasure dive and enjoy it. And so because of that, that's where you kind of get that disconnect. And we had one of our staff members, Annie Savan, who did a Pucha Ketcha presentation, and her presentation was about dive pros and do you get to pleasure dive? And that was a real awakening for me to say, no, I don't. I haven't pleasure dove in a long time. So my followers that are on the podcast know that I'm transitioning. I'm using this time right now to transition into free diving and become a free diving instructor. So that is a passion that I've had for a long time, but I've suppressed it, just focusing on so many other things in life. And this was another awakening that came about from this time in lockdown to say, no, come out of this stronger than we were when we went in.
Yeah, exactly. Wesley Scott. Well, let me do Brock Braille. This is kind of going back to what we were saying before. Just wanted to throw what's a cassette tape going on, and that was from prior. But Wesley Scott has a question. Do you accept volunteers, Tech, prerequisite training? What's up with what you guys got going on there?
Hey, Wes. With our dive program, it is mostly geared for the students, faculty, and staff of Nova Southeastern University. But that's with our academic diving program. Now, we serve to get the students ready and recreational diving, but also preparing them in the scientific diving realms. So at Nova Southeastern University, we have a huge marine biology program, both undergraduate and graduate. The marine sciences are one of the top schools at Nova. And so we exist to serve that community, to raise them up as divers. And so for the AAUS, as you know, with the scientific diving, those 5 prerequisite certifications that we have of open water diver, advanced rescue, nitrox, and oxygen provider, we serve that need. The scientific side of our our university doesn't do the training; they do the AAUS and scientific dive side. So our dive safety officer is focused on that side of the house. So with our program, we're gearing up all these students, and they grow up through it, and then they become dive masters and instructors, and they lead the dive club, and it's an awesome program. We have 20 something staff members. The scientific community out at the Oceanographic Center, though, Wes, is where you would look in for the volunteer side of things, because there are certain labs that are out there that look for volunteers. One of the great and most famous ones is our shark tagging program. And with that, Dr. Mahmood Sivji has one of the top shark data tracking and monitoring programs in the world. And we're doing it right off our shores here of Broward County, West Palm, Fort Lauderdale area. Get on a dive boat and catching sharks, tagging them, measuring them, doing the data collection, and then sending them off. So you can be a part of that. And then, we've got the coral transplanting that's going on. So there are ways to get in touch with our scientific divers to be a part of what they have in volunteer arenas. So that does go on. And I can put anybody in touch with the powers to be to do that.
Excellent. Very nice. Good. Great answer. So let's get back to a little bit let's talk about your history. Where'd you come from? How'd you get here? All that fun stuff. But keep it in within a couple of minutes there, because I know you've got a long history.
Yeah, right. That ain't happening. No, but I started off diving when I was 12 years old here off of Lauderdale by the Sea. Went out and was hooked, loved it. Went through my open water diver advanced classes when I was an early teen, and then went to University of Florida. I dropped a golf class to get, I had a conflict. And there were the guys there saying, hey, you need to get a PE credit? I said, yeah. They said, are you a diver? I said, yeah. And they enticed me into becoming an assistant instructor. So I signed up for a 2-credit assistant instructor class. The rest is history. After I went through that class, I was a horrible assistant instructor. I had all these conflicts and everything. I was bad. But at the end of it, everybody seemed to really bond with me, and they liked me. And so there was this urging, hey, you should come through the instructor course with us. And I was like, no, I'm not good enough for it. And I hated physics. I couldn't do the skin ditch and recovery. I mean, I was not good. But the night before, one of my friends convinced me, and I called my mom up and I said, Mom, can I borrow $1,000 to be a dive instructor? And she said, well, it's something you can always fall back on. And that's been our running joke forever. Once I became an instructor with that program, I went right into instructor training, multiple agencies, speaking at conventions, writing, and then doors opened. And so those doors opened, and I was able to land an internship with the YMCA of the USA, which had a scuba program back in the day, a very popular one. And then that led to a consultant position, that led to assistant director, and then eventually the national director of the YMCA scuba program. When I left that, I did forensic dive accident investigation. I also had time with Broward Sheriff's Office, time as dive master, before that even. So I've done a ton of stuff in the dive industry. Including Pro Dive, the resurrection of Pro Dive that happened. I was able to be a part of that resurrection. A great group of people, legendary group. And then on to Nova Southeastern University. And that was just a blessing to have that happen.
I mean, it just astonishes me that you could have been taken out in the first round of the Great Dive podcast bracket. I mean, that is just ridiculous with the history that you have to be pulled out. That is garbage.
But you got to look at everyone else. I mean, come on. Stephen Frink goes. John Chatterton goes. Jill
that's
Heiner
garbage,
goes.
by the way. Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
So,
it's rigged. Whatever Brando wants, he gets, except for Creature, apparently. So I'm Team Creature all the way. I know that makes him mad. So,
he lives down here, by the way.
Does he?
Yeah, the original Oh, I'm blanking on his name now too. Darn it, I haven't even had enough whiskey to be having so much memory loss. It must be my age.
No, you need more whiskey to help your memory.
Right,
That's how this
exactly.
works, apparently.
Yeah. So if it's not evident by the brain, it's the gray in the beard. But no, it'll come to me probably by the end or when we're done tomorrow. It'll come to me. But yeah, he lives right down here in Davie, Florida, the original guy. And he's apparently writing a memoir on all of his time as the creature of the Black Lagoon. But he was also on Thunderball and everything. Great, cool guy.
Yeah, that'd be very interesting to see. All right, so we kind of digressed, but Brock had a question that I think we should get answered. How does the academic program that you're doing differ from the standard agency training programs? Obviously, the students must get significantly more face time and in water time.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, you're right, Brock. That's how it goes. And the deal is that academic diving, I'll take you back to that time at University of Florida when I got in there, and I remember the very first night as an assistant instructor candidate, and I sat down in the staff meeting, and the director of the dive program, going through a whole bunch of stuff, said, all right, who are the 2 new divers that we have? And me and another guy raised our hands, and the whole room chuckles because me and the other guy, Scott, came from outside. We did not grow up in the academic dive program. We, got trained elsewhere and then came in. And the whole room laughed. And I thought, oh my gosh, you bunch of arrogant people. And there were these stabs at Patty and, all that stuff and everything like that. And I'm like, oh man, I don't know if I like this and you people. Mm-hmm. And the director of the program basically says, that's okay. Welcome to the world of academic diving. We'll see how much you really know tonight in your pre-assessment exam. And I took the YMCA Advanced Diver exam. Now, I was a PADI Advanced Diver at the time, and I took the YMCA Scuba Advanced Diver exam. I scored a 32%.
Wow.
32%. So that was pretty crazy. And that was my awakening to what academic diving is. What we have is this luxury of being able to teach students over an entire semester. And teaching over an entire semester, like in our academic courses, that's 15 weeks long. So in our academic open water diver course, we're spending 4 weeks just on snorkeling, skin diving alone, just to get that. And yeah, they're doing underwater breath holds with mask clears and everything just to build a proficiency. And then we take them through the rest. And so it's mostly about skill variations and skill repeats. And because we get to put so much skill variation and skill repeat into the development of the diver, they come out exceptionally skilled and comfortable. And so when we go to the lake and then onto the boat and we say, here you go. Every open water diver is nervous when they go on their open water checkout dives, right? Our people are too, even after 14 weeks, right? But then they look and we say, well, that class right there, that's a weekend scuba class. They're getting certified in 3 days. And the students just turn their head and they go, how can that be done? Yeah. They actually can't process it. And then they watch students that are literally struggling with mask clearing and things like that, and then jumping in and doing confined open water dive 1. And so that then solidifies that the world of academic diving is so very different because the amount of time and the amount of academics that we put in. So our program does PADI for our diving level. Our open water divers in our 4-credit class read the Encyclopedia of Recreational Diving, and they are tested and quizzed on that. So yeah, they'll go through the e-learning on the side, but in the classroom, we're taking them to a way higher level, which means that as professionals, if we're teaching our open water divers to the same level of theory that a PADI dive master is expected to know, that means that our world has to be pretty buttoned up for knowledge as well. And so that is another piece of the academic diving, is that we We have a broader knowledge base, and we like to pour that into the students because we're giving them 2 credit hours. So it can't just be what you get out of the box from a certification agency. It's got to be more. And that's where our contact hours flourish. But even in our recreational programs that are not for credit, our open water diver class is 6 weeks long. It meets 2 nights a week for 6 weeks. So, with all that, we're very happy to produce students that are comfortable and competent and qualified when they go out into the open water environment. And they get on the dive boats, and our promise to every student is this at the beginning of class: you are going to be more comfortable and more prepared than the majority of other divers that are coming out of their training. And you'll be even more comfortable than some seasoned divers. No one believes us. Not one person believes us until they're done with their open water checkout weekend. And they go, you're right. There were people that didn't know how to set up their scuba equipment. There were people panicking. There were people this and that and the other thing. I'm like, yeah, you've got such a great thing by having all this time that you can invest in this dive training. And they get that. And then they love it, and they're kind of hooked. And then they go to advanced, and then they want to be a dive master, because if they're a student, they want the coolest job on the university.
Right. Yeah.
To be a scuba instructor or a dive master with the academic dive program, right? Getting paid to dive and take your other peers diving with you and everything,
right?
And teaching them. It's so cool.
Yeah.
So cool. So that's what we have a great time at our academic dive program.
Yeah. And I mean, and the education, I mean, that's what keeps people diving, right? So they were looking at that. What was the issues of people not continuing on? Why weren't they going further in diving and continuing to dive? It's because they didn't feel comfortable. Those weekend little, here's just enough to get you out of my class type of situation is not enough.
You're so right.
Yeah,
you're so right, Jason. And anybody listening to this, if you want to have an experiment, you can get on OfferUp, Craigslist, eBay, but OfferUp is really good because it's regional. So is Craigslist. OfferUp app, if you throw in just, let's say, Miami, Fort Lauderdale, West Palm Beach, throw that in there and type in scuba equipment that you're searching for, you're going to be amazed at the amount of full sets of scuba equipment that say the words brand new, used once, used twice, used 3 times.
Yep.
And so I've told this to many people, and this might be distasteful to some, but I have inquired, and I have just kind of gone down that rabbit hole with some people and said, looking at your equipment, I'm curious why only used a couple times. You would be amazed how many people say, I can't equalize, or it's not for me, or my husband wanted to do it, I didn't want to do it. I have heard so many stories, and they're all very sad. And it's really, you hardly get, we've run out of money and we can't afford scuba diving. You don't get that. This is South Florida. You can go off the beach. You just have to pay for parking and air in your tank. Right? So
exactly.
When you hear that, it's very indicative of, and then just, of course, just discussing with people informally, you hear how people are just put through really abbreviated courses and abbreviated training, and they never got the opportunity to clear their ears, and they have been dismissed, and they check out, and they basically say, I'm done. And my question to every single person that I ever come in contact with that tells me I can't dive because I can't clear my ears, and I say, can you equalize in an airplane? And they say, yeah, sure.
Yeah. So
you mean you chew gum or blow your nose and you can equalize in an airplane? Yep. But you can't do it underwater. I'm sorry, you're just not doing it the right way. Physiologically, you are able to do this.
Yep.
Let's work it. Let's work through it, and it's amazing. So, unfortunately, when you lack contact hours like that, then those things suffer. So, it's kind of sad.
Yeah, and that's the race to the bottom, right? We're just trying to get as many people pushed through, and it actually hurts everybody because, especially with the pricing of open water classes, the way people have them priced, you're not even making money on those. So you're not making money. You're just, just pulling everything out of the entire, the industry, and not making it so people continue on and looking at, like I teach SDI, and one of the big things we don't teach advanced almost ever anymore, because when somebody comes in and they said, I want the next class, we say, well, why? What do you want? What do you really truly want to learn? And they say, well, I want to go deeper. I want to figure out my navigation. I just can feel lost. So, okay, here's the class for you. We're going to go ahead and we're going to give you multiple dives and make sure you're really good at that one thing. And they go, oh, okay, that sounds great. And we go ahead and we funnel them into there, and they just love it. Because advanced adventure is considered one of those sort of specialties and not core with the SDI program. So, which has been huge. Like, it's just, we haven't sold a single one anymore, because people that want to go deep, like, you want to go deep, I'm not teaching you one time. I'm going to take you out. You're going to do 2 or 3 dives. You're going to have a pony bottle on. We're going to make sure you understand everything about actually going to this deep situation. And it's, it's all about that training. So
I like that. You're speaking something really important here. When we look at this kind of sampling of an advanced class, let's take it to here, what we're talking about, like in the very competitive sense that is going on in South Florida. There's a dive shop on every corner. I'm being facetious, but so the competition is really high. So what happens to engage and get people in is to undercut the competition. So that's where you're seeing our $99 scuba classes, 3 days and so forth. And so now that undercutting gets the person in the door. And now they have hidden fees all over the place sometimes, and that is a whole nother soapbox of mine. But the deal is that they're competing on that so that they can make the equipment sales. But what is suffering is the training. And then what we're also seeing is that they are suppressing all of the cost factors in that course. So seasoned instructors that would command a little bit more money, nope. Open water divers are going to go with the newbies. Pool sessions done in apartment complex pools so that they don't have to pay the rental fees of municipal pools that have deep water, all the way to our open water dives. We have some shops that all 4 checkout dives are going to be done beach dives. Well, that means you don't go much more than 23, 22 feet deep total in your entire experience. You stick your gauge in the sand, you might get to 30. And so what's happening is we're seeing that take place. And now, so if an open water diver comes out and their deepest dive that they've done is 30 feet as an open water diver, now what happens when advanced comes? Well, when advanced comes, now you've got those same shops saying, well, now you get the dive boat experience. And most of our dive boats are either going to some pretty beefy sites, or our second reef, which is going to be on we'll see on our artificial that does our slope down, and we'll get down to that 70-foot mark in the sand, 72 in the sand, with an artificial reef or wreck on top of that. That's where we're taking our open water divers, and they're doing their mask removal and replacement at 60 feet precisely. That's our limit on the standard. But then we're watching advanced courses, and the advanced deep dive in the person's logbook is 70 feet. And you're sitting there kind of going, there's the air management isn't the same, narcosis isn't the same, all of the things. So I applaud what you're saying, because what we're seeing is kind of this super watered down thing. And now a person comes out, they go, I'm an advanced diver. They head down to the Bib or the Dwayne down in the Keys, and the dive boat says, we're only taking advanced divers on this wreck. The person's never been below 70 feet. They're narked out of their gourd because now the current is ripping down there as well, and now the CO2 is impacting, and they never got that. So I like what you're saying. If you pay attention more, you're actually giving them more in that area that's of interest to them.
Yeah. And that's like, and I've been like a flag on a line on those wrecks before, and I know exactly what you're talking about. And one of the things we talk about in our IDC, when I teach an IDC, is and I throw the question. I go, who's going to apply for their deep specialty as soon as you're done? You guys been deep? You guys going to be a deep instructor? Like, oh yeah, me. All right. How many of you guys have seen a computer in Deco? They go, I didn't have to be tech to do this. I'm not saying. I'm just saying, have you ever seen a computer in Deco? And they're like, no. Okay. Well, I've got a pressure pot in the back, so we should probably at least do that. If you're going to take students to 130 and get yourself flirting right on the edge of things, you might want to know what your computer looks like in Deco. Like, let's talk about that,
Right.
And it's just, it's that preparation for stuff that's crazy. Wesley Scott, best course I took was solo diver. Self-reliance is key. Very interesting. What's your take on that, Tech?
Yeah, I saw Wes's post on that the other day, and I didn't comment. I hate to admit I'm not a fan of solo dive.
That's fine.
I think that there is an element and a need for it, and I think that to go through it will teach you things about yourself and about almost a sustainability that you had never thought before because you have relied on a buddy, and we've gone so hardcore into the buddy system. That is what I appreciate about the solo diver type of program. But in actual application, I have to admit, I rarely meet people in this line of work that are recreational divers that should do that. Mm-hmm. Because the majority of the people that I meet that say that's what I want are precisely the people that should not be doing it. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, that's what I see. And so my experience dictates that it's kind of for the wrong reasons. But, kudos to you, Wesley, is that, you're getting out the different things that you've never considered before in more of a self-reliance and more of, how do I get out of this if my buddy isn't available? And look, that's what's happening. I mean, we go on dive trips and we're buddied up with strangers that we don't know. And you can do everything you want to try to get, hey, let's talk about if we need to air share. Let's talk about this. What computer are you running? You can talk and plan as much as you want with that stranger. But the fact is, you might jump in the water and that stranger just takes off and they are lobstering or they are doing photography and you are completely off their radar. So in essence, are you solo diving in that capacity? One could argue you are. So I think that that's where there's some real benefit in looking at it in a different way that says, what can I glean out of this? That if I were to ever be self-reliant, how can I? So that's my caveat. There's some really good elements of it, but the people that I've seen that have gravitated towards it are usually not the ones that should. They're doing it for ulterior motives that aren't really wise.
See, I particularly enjoy teaching solo, and we'll get to the whole thing in a second. But so one of the things that I was in, even beyond the camp that you were like, buddy system. There's a bunch of different things. Using the terminology team versus buddy changes the whole psychology of everything. Thinking about that, and we had been using that terminology, but I stole that completely from East Coast divers after we had been using the terminology anyways. Nick and Alex talk about it all the time. Like it's a team. It's not, hey, we're buddies. It's a team. We're together doing this thing together. And it's got that more team aspect. And then I was like, solo is not is self-reliant. Solo is not a thing for me. And then somebody mentioned, he goes, it was when I was crossing over to SDI, and they're like, so do you solo dive? I'm like, no, I don't solo dive. They're like, so every single time you take students out, you completely have the utmost reliability that they could save you. And I was like, okay, yeah, I probably do solo dive. Yes, that you are probably correct in that statement. That's interesting. And then I started teaching solo, and my solo course is, like you said, I'll take students on. My solo course is very hard. I teach it a lot. I enjoy teaching it. The number of people that come out qualified at the end of it is a very different story. They go into it, they see what it's like, and they'll be like, yeah, that was my 3 dives. I understand the situation that I'm getting myself into now, and I love what I have learned. However, you are right. I should not solo dive. Thank you very much for your time. And we see that a fair amount. But it's And I actually have people that now are like, I want your solo course. And I'm like, you did hear that it's very, very hard. Like, yes, I did. Like, all right, then come on. Like, it's all right. You're more than welcome to. And
that's cool.
It's just a different way of teaching it. Like, they come with expecting that, you're going to be left with some things that you probably need to work on. You're not going to get this weekend. This is not going to happen. So that's just a different perspective. Yeah. So you got to earn it. I talked to you before they sign up. I have to hand you a card with my name on it that says you can go in the water alone.
Yeah.
And if you die, my name is going to be pulled up immediately of the fact that you went in the water alone. Like, do you think I'm just going to hand you something? No, you have to earn this thing.
Right.
So it's very hard to get. But yeah, that's
cool.
it. Yep. Just checking the chat there. Beautiful. All right. So we have gone down a rabbit hole in multiple different directions here. I don't think we're going to get a single question that I really truly wanted to ask you. So let's redirect back into forensic diving analysis. You kind of threw that out there, and I don't think that's something that's I've seen very much in looking, prepping for the interview and looking back through. And when I hear something like that I haven't heard too much about, I don't think others have heard too much about it either. So can you talk about your forensic dive analysis stuff if you can?
Yeah, sure. Forensic dive accident investigation. It kind of started for me when I was telling you I was at the University of Florida. My mom had a bout of cancer that I came home for during my college years. And I was, I want to say 20 or 21 at the time. And I came back to Fort Lauderdale, and I was with Mom while she was going through treatment and everything. And I'm an only child and single mom. So, I was there for her. But then I also needed to do something. Mm-hmm. And so I wound up getting with a dive shop down here called Orbit Marine Sports. I did private instruction with them, and I was a dive master. I didn't want to work the shop much. I wanted to be out there, and I wanted to, kind of experience that. So I did that. But at the same time, I had given up cave diving. And so I can't cave dive down here now with my mom and down here. So I wanted to do something a little bit more extreme. And so I approached Broward Sheriff's Office dive rescue team, and they actually did take on volunteers, and they looked at this college kid with, kind of long hair and said, son, what makes you think you can do this? We have seasoned, hardened road deputies that are dive masters that they do their first vehicle recovery in a canal, and they throw their credentials down after that and quit the team. What makes you think you can do that? And I just sat there with the lieutenant, and I was kind of, like, well, I cave dive, and I'm okay, and, zero visibility, that type of thing. It's like, all right, we'll give you a shot. And sure enough, I did it. Within 1 year, I was a public safety scuba instructor with Dive Rescue International, and I was an instructor teaching the members on the team. That's nice. How much I just had skill sets that allowed me to do that very well and comfortably. And I wasn't really fazed by it. That started my passion for law enforcement. So because I had all these security clearances to be on the dive rescue team, then I went through the Palm Beach Police Academy, became an auxiliary officer. Then I was able to go out with Marine Patrol, go out with the helicopter unit, and do in the very first episode of Cops. There's only, I don't know how many of your listeners are going to remember the show Cops, but when it first came out, it was all profiled Broward Sheriff's Office. And I was in several episodes of Cops doing reverse stings. So with that, it was like, I got I became an adrenaline junkie kind of in a way that was like, I loved that side of what we did. And I wasn't a road deputy that had to do all the things. So I got really hooked because I was doing all the sexy stuff. Mm-hmm. Well, Mom gets good. I go back to University of Florida. I direct the dive program, graduate, come back, do the YMCA thing. And it was during my time at University of Florida that I went through the full academy, and I became a Gainesville Police Department officer. And so I did that while I was going to school part-time while I was teaching scuba. And so a bunch of things worked back together that when I was down here, there was an opportunity to come work for Dive and Marine Consultants International, which works with our insurance. So we've got our liability insurance that's from the different agencies, but the different agencies with our liability insurance also have on retainer forensic dive accident investigators and defense attorneys. And it's all about knowing the industry and knowing standards really well. And that was what I was brought in. I had the investigative skills from my time in law enforcement, and I had a background in dive agency training standards, being a multi-agency instructor and a prior national director of an agency. So it was kind of the perfect storm that helped with that job and that role. But I will say it's the darkest side of our sport. Mm-hmm. It is where an incident has happened. That incident could be minor or it could be major. And when you're dealing with that, I would have to go to my peers. And the way that you are in the defense world is to understand what the plaintiffs are going to want to discover and find out. So even on the defense side, it is challenging to go to your peers and try to find where they went wrong so that you can understand a case in its fullest scope and what truly were the issues that were involved. And so, we all teach it in the IDCs. You do too. Why do we have the waivers and releases? Why do we have the medicals and everything like that? Well, I got to see and live firsthand when those things weren't done right, when standards were violated and how it led to a fatality. When you start to see it firsthand, it isn't just, oh, that's what they say we should do. No, there are reasons for all of this. And when you see that people die because of simple things going awry, standards violations or whatever, that's where it gets to be super dark. And that's the dark side of our sport, is when you have to investigate the incidents and accidents that happen. And of course, a lot of times it is not a fault of the dive professional. It's that the individual had their cardiac event just happened to happen on that dive. But the autopsies don't reveal which happened first. Did the cardiac event happen first, or did the drowning happen first? So that becomes a challenge. And that's where the investigative skills come into play to try to get out there. So like when Dan Orr gives his presentations on diving fatalities and accident statistics, and he talks about Divers Alert Network just put out in their last reports, and I'm going to get this wrong, but it's something like 60% of fatalities that are suspected to be cardiac events, they actually had symptoms of cardiac event prior to the dive. And so when you look at that, then that's where the investigative process becomes a little bit better, especially on the dive professional, to say, no, look, he has a medical history. He had these signs and symptoms before the dive, and then this is what happened. But unfortunately, the family doesn't see it that way. They see a loved one, a great father, a provider for that family that has just succumbed to a recreational sport, a wonderful activity that they loved, but they died. Obviously, someone's at fault. There must be something wrong. And that's when litigation starts to unfold. So that's the nutshell of what the forensic dive accident investigation was, and what I did in that role.
Interesting. I mean, we had Gareth Locke on, and he was talking about the If Only stuff, the If Only movie that film they just put out, and it's just very interesting seeing the different sides of things and how to navigate all of that and create a just culture, and for all of us to learn while we still can't talk about it at the same time because of all the litigiousness of our society. It's very interesting trying to figure out how can we all grow and develop and still have checks and balances, which is the classic challenge.
Gareth is a rock star. He really is, and what he's doing and his passion for safety is
Mhm.
is unparalleled. I mean, you've got people that, yeah, their jobs are risk management and safety in our industry and things like that. Divers Alert Network does a great job. But when you look at Gareth, he's got an academic background
Mhm.
that then lends itself into a much more complex way of breaking down incidents,
Mhm.
all for the ability to prevent them in the first place. I think it's brilliant.
Yep. I've started requiring some sort of human factors training before all IDCs and
Cool.
technical training. Everything has to have some sort of human factor so we can at least have that conversation.
Yeah,
We've
and now that
adopted
he's
a lot of
gotten
it.
the online programs,
Yep.
that makes it so much easier.
Yep.
You know, for years he was just bouncing around the world,
Mhm.
and it'd be like,
Yep.
"Hey, I'm coming to South Florida. Do you want to get together?" "Oh man, I'd love
Mhm.
to, but
Yep.
So now that he's going online, that's a game changer.
Yeah, we had him here about a year and a half ago, and then we require the online or the book or whatever. So,
Yeah.
which is very interesting. So now I got to pick and choose because we're up to close to an hour. My God, I got so many questions that I need to ask you, but I think because of the way we've been answering questions, and there's probably a story behind this, I've got a loaded question for you. So. You have, what was today? The 38th episode of the Dive Locker, right? 38 was today.
Yeah.
And then how many League of Extraordinary Diver episodes do you got?
We should be about 32 or 34.
Okay. So we got two different podcasts. We got two different kind of subsets. One's kind of more of your profiling divers, and one's kind of more of the dive professional stuff. Do you have a favorite episode, like somebody that you were dying to conversate with, that you talked with, or got the topic that you got to talk about? What is there anything that just sticks out as like the podcast you've done so far?
Oh, mercy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great one. It requires thought, and I think that if I scrolled through all the names and episodes, I'd be sitting here like fireworks, just
Yep.
Because there are just so many fantastic stories and so many fantastic people. And some of the stories that are in the League of Extraordinary Divers podcast are just jaw dropping. And you go, no, really? And some of them you're howling laughing. And so I think that there's like my favorite funny story is this guy's, and my favorite tragic story or scary story is this one, and on and on. So it's hard to pick a favorite, but since I'm being forced to, I would have to say Dottie Frazier.
Okay.
The first female scuba instructor. I believe that my episode with her was one of the most revealing of history. And I've talked to some real legends in the industry that have been around from the beginning days, and their stories are epic. But Dottie's stories, I think, were some of the best in terms of a glimpse at that time. And so here is the first female scuba instructor in our industry going through this male dominated macho sport that is originated military diving, right? So all of the instruction came military, and then military from the LA County into the YMCA into the early NAUI, right? And so you look at that, and here comes this petite woman, but she had just this aquatic comfort and this zest, and she could come in and run circles around the guys, and they didn't like that. And at first, I mean, her interview just talks about, like, you've watched the show Mad Men,
Yep.
a really cool show, but you obviously see the sexism that went on back in those days, right? She talks about how that was just so alive, and that men would just scoff at her for even being a diver, not much that she's going through all these ranks to become an instructor, and all that she had to deal with. And there were bold men that raised up that said, You're not going to treat her like this. She's one of the best. And you'll see. You'll get your butt handed to you. And sure enough, those stories were, I think, so cool because we've watched how women are shaping our dive industry right now, not only at the low levels, at the instructor levels, and at the administrative levels. We're seeing this, and it's awesome. My staff at Nova Southeastern University is mostly female. And so when we look at this, that was the big thing. Her episode just kind of blew my mind. I did not know that existed. And to hear her story of heroism, if it's a woman, I don't know. Anyhow, to hear her story of that, how she overcame all that was just awesome. So I would give that my number one favorite pick was Dottie Frazier.
Nice. Actually, that leads me to another question really quick because I've got you here. Your dive classes at the university, what is the demographic like? Males versus females, approximately? Do you know?
60% female.
So we are at like 80% female. And it was just for hearing all of the, diving's a guy sport. And from the recreational owning a shop perspective, it's been, mostly males. And it has been semester after semester after semester. We're like, you're the only guy in this class. Sorry, dude. Or you're welcome. I don't know.
Right.
So it's just been interesting that you said that where we're in the exact same situation. We didn't know what that was, but that's very interesting.
That's what we're seeing too. And in my last class, last semester, before we closed down the winter semester, the Tuesday night and then the Thursday morning class, out of 8 students in that pool lab, 3 were male out of the 8. In the Tuesday night class, all women.
Really?
Not one woman. So that one sways us, out of 16, there's 3 men. But when we look at all the other classes, it starts to go. Nova Southeastern University actually has a higher ratio of women to men at the university student body anyhow. But to find that it is represented in our activities in diving is really awesome. I like that.
Super exciting. Jill Heiner's been at the shop and we've done some stuff with Jill and stuff like that, which we've just been trying to, women in diving. We're seeing at the university level, which is great. Hopefully that translates into that, having a little bit more representation both sides. So, which is excellent. So like I said, when we were talking before, I planned for about 45 minutes worth of material. I go through my 5 minutes that I thought I was going to cover, and it ends up being I've got so many more questions for you, but since we're coming up to an hour, I'm going to back you out and say goodbye, and then I'll bring you back in. We'll chat after I say goodbye to everybody else. But Tec, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. We just scratched the surface of things I'd like to talk to you about. Maybe we'll have to have you back on.
That sounds great. Thanks so much, Jason. I really appreciate the time. It's been a lot of fun.
Any parting words for the guests on the show?
Oh, I think that those that are listening, kudos. You're staying active. You're staying involved. You're just soaking it in, and I love that. I love that when we can just experience what there is in diving and learn from others, whether it's the historical or whether it's something, you'll glean something out of it, and that is a really cool thing. So thank you guys. Thanks, Brock. Thanks, Wes.
Thanks, guys. I'm gonna let Tec go, and then I'll chat with you after in a second, and then I'm gonna talk to everybody on the stream. All right, thanks, Tec.
See you guys.
Bye. Hey guys, thank you so much for listening to the show once again. It was a pleasure having you guys on. It will be saved on YouTube. You can subscribe that direction. You will be able to subscribe right there on YouTube. Facebook doesn't have a subscription, but YouTube, you can subscribe right there. We do have a Patreon if you would like to support us in that aspect. We got some things that I'm working on in June to take it up another notch. We'll see what ends up working out for us, but we're going to try and take it up a little notch. It's going to cost me a little bit, but I'm going to try to do some things. So any support would help us out a ton. Buy those whiskey glasses or just throw us a like on Patreon. Just $1 a month helps out. Anybody can do that. I will post a link. So thank you very much for watching. on this Wednesday night, and we're going to try and keep it to Wednesday nights if we can going forward. Have a wonderful night. Stay safe. Be healthy. Let us know if there's anything we can do for you guys. Thank you very much. Have a great night.